I got high hopes, high aspirations.
Sweet. Well, we have high aspirations too, Chris. We're live, and we're now going to talk about healthcare tech. But to let you guys know, we were talking nothing healthcare tech behind the scenes. It was all football, fantasy drafts, and Zane and Chris will give you all the insights on who you guys should pick up for your teams. We'll talk a little bit about unique opportunities in pharmacy and maybe some project management, product management stuff that you guys could be doing. Should pharmacists be good at fantasy football?
You should be good at researching. So that means you should generally be good at fantasy football, right?
What do you think, Chris?
I would tend to agree with that. You've got to be good with numbers, right? You've got to be good looking at data, looking at analytics, using analytics. I think you've got a good shot as a pharmacist at being good at fantasy football. I'll report back to you guys in a couple months on that too. So.
Yeah, I think it's so much fun that you get to look at all the pre-draft stuff. There's like all the hype of these guys are going to be the best, and then you really get into like, for folks that don't know with fantasy football, like everything related to fantasy football all around individual players accumulating points based on yards and touchdowns and tackles, catches, etc. And you choose the players that you think are going to do the best, and then you make an entire league draft, and that is now your team. So when you're making those drafts like beforehand, everybody's going to say this is going to be the top running back, for example, of the entire year. But it gets even nerdier, which that's the part that I think all of us pharmacists love. It's not just this is going to be best running back. It's going to be this running back has the best schedule, is running on the best surfaces, is likely to get the most touches based on the inaccuracies or issues with this quarterback. Like that's where you get to jump in even further. And I think that's why it's so fun for pharmacy nerds like us.
So could that be a unique opportunity for pharmacists, fantasy football liaisons?
I think so. I think that there could be a market for that. Chris, do you think that we could start up an adventure in the fantasy football world? Like, what would it be? Fantasy football apothecary?
I think there's a good shot. I want to hear who you guys picked as your first round draft pick, though.
I picked the running back from Atlanta, Robinson. I think Bijan Robinson. I think his name is. Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. The Texas kid. And Chris, who'd you pick?
Yeah, 2 leagues. The first one had a pretty high pick. Who's Jalen Waddle's wide receiver co-part? Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
That was one of them. And then my second one was Austin Eckler. So
nice. I was just reading about Austin Eckler. He is a Boise State guy is Kellen Moore, who ended up becoming their offensive coordinator. And we're just talking about him being the guy this year and getting the primary level of carries. But for me, being a Northwest guy, Kellen Moore went to a high school just down the road from me before he went to Boise State. So there's the world in 6 degrees kind of deal there. And Jonathan, listening into the show, says, won my league by a landslide last year. So there it is, guys. I mean, fantasy football could be the next venture for us as pharmacists, at least as a side hustle. But let's get into the topic of today. Super excited to have Chris join us. In fact, I think Chris could even have a spin-off show here related to just unique opportunities in pharmacy, because I think there's a ton of opportunity to do things that are different than the typical 3 pathways that we've kind of always seen. Zain and I and Chris have all landed in different pharmacy worlds in one way, shape, or form. But we were talking offline, Chris and I were, about the fact that there is one opportunity and I'll let Chris jump into it, that doesn't seem like there's just a direct academic path to get there. And that makes pharmacy a really good segue to jump into it.
Yeah, absolutely. This all kind of started, right? Looked at a LinkedIn post and somebody put the statistics for pharmacist wages, right, for the past several years. And really, it showed moderate increases in salary, but probably not enough to even cover inflation. And what does that really mean? There's a lot of different comments in that chat. But really, the thing I wanted to point out there was, pharmacists have a lot of different value, right? And a lot of value that we bring, and not only a dispensing patient care avenue. So that's what really got me kind of thinking, as pharmacists, like how do we engage other pharmacists? How do we elevate other pharmacists? How do we make those connections, help them out, and help each other out as a profession to not only become dispensing experts and medication experts, really leverage that knowledge and take us into different avenues, right? And I got to thinking about myself and kind of my career projection, my career trajectory, and thought of you guys as well. And we're all product managers. And every product manager I've worked with, nobody ever said I majored in product manager. Have you guys ever met one of those?
I think like most companies don't even know what a product manager is supposed to be doing. Like, so yeah, I mean, no, I agree with you. I think a lot of it has to do, I think our profession is unique in the sense that we have our hands in everything, but also annoying in the sense that we don't like, I should say annoying. We are trained not to be kind of the nail sticking out, right? Every time, like we don't want to be seen, we don't want to be heard, like all of this stuff. I think pharmacy in general is not created, but like we teach our students, we the way we are taught, the way our workflows are, everything, like we want to just be in the shadows, right? It isn't just, it's very, until very recently, that's basically what product management is in a nutshell right there. But I think basically there's one thing that I always bring up is, I was talking to a doctor, a hematologist, and they work with pharmacists. They round with them every day. And they were like, what do you guys do after rounds, right? And this person loved pharmacy. They loved pharmacists in general. They're like, you guys make my life easier, but I only hear from you guys, after rounds when I've done something wrong, or you guys are trying to help me, right? Or, something's not covered. And that kind of like struck me really to the core, because why is it that people have to work with us to understand our value? And I don't think that's something, I think as pharmacy, we're always looking externally to find our value, right? Like we're like, hey, we're value, but we don't ever look internally, like this is how we are valuable, right? Like, and that really like always, that interaction has always stuck with me, because that person was not being mean or anything. They were like, hey, how can I empower you guys? How can I help pharmacists around me? And they didn't even know what we did. So I think that's a huge problem right there.
Interesting. So just to pull at that a little bit, how do you think we should value ourselves, Zain? Like, what are the things that are uniquely like, compared to other professions and other individuals out there, here's what we have in spades that we need to own to a greater height?
I think anything medication related should go through us, not just dispensing. I'm talking about like everything, right? Like, I mean, we are the medication experts. So anytime there's counseling happening, whatever, that should go through us. But a lot of times we in many areas, whatever, we're very passive, right? We'll take on stuff that necessarily shouldn't be our job, but we won't take on the things that should be our jobs. And that's kind of being very painting with a broad brush. And I'm talking about, but like, kind of talking about unique opportunities. The only way you're going to find unique opportunities for pharmacists is if those unique opportunities start popping up, right? Like, how many times it isn't until very recently where we're now seeing like PharmDs in product managing roles, right? Like they're looking for specifically for PharmDs, but that's because people like Chris and yourself and like others have shown people like, hey, this is what a pharmacist can do. This is what they're capable of. Like, we need these people on thing. So like, I think, yes, there are unique opportunities for pharmacists out there, and Chris will talk about a lot of them. But I think also we as a profession need to keep pushing our profession so these unique opportunities are more prevalent, so that where you're not networking for 3.5 years like I was to get a product management role, right? Like it's there as if they're looking for somebody like you, and you'll get it.
Yeah. And, I'll add on to that, right? You look at some of the innate tendencies that pharmacists have, right? Just in our job roles, and looking at product managers, right? We all have so many different stakeholders, right? As a pharmacist working in a hospital, we answer to physicians, we answer to nurses, we answer to leadership teams, executive teams, right? We also answer to the patients. So there's different, people in the care team that we're all connected to, that, we talk to, we discuss with, and we have to communicate, make action plans to get best outcomes. You look at product management and product managers, and specifically, we deal with internal and external stakeholders, right? Not only the end users, but the customer success team, the implementation team, the sales team, right? So being a pharmacist, just innately, you have to have those good communication skills, right? You have to be able to work hard. And even as a pharmacist, whether deadlines are set or not, there's definitely deadlines in the amount of time to verify orders, dispense drugs, right? Get the drugs to the nurses to administer. There's a lot of those kind of deadlines, deliverables that we have to always keep in the back of our heads. And it's the same thing in product management, right? Requirements are due. The roadmap is set, right? Things can adjust, but all those deliverables have timelines, and that's something innately that a pharmacist kind of brings in. And then innate curiosity, right? What do we do? Well, people ask us for drug questions all the time, and the honest answer, if we're all honest, is 90% of the time we don't know the answer off the top of our head. But what do? We look at it. We look at the literature. We look at the research. We look at all the stats and what it says, right? It's the same thing with product management. You have to have that innate curiosity and that go-getter mentality, right? You've got to make sure that the validations, the assumptions that you're making are validated in that marketplace, right? Or you're not going to succeed. So there's a lot of correlations, not looking at just kind of tangible aspects of pharmacy, but the intangibles that a pharmacist brings to product management.
Interesting. So a few of the things I'll pull from what you just said there, Chris, that I think are actually really spot on for several roles in outside the pharmacy world, are one, just being able to talk and work with multiple stakeholders all toward common goals and speak different languages all at the same time. So I think that translational skill, to be able to bring a concept across an entire group is a really fascinating one to draw some ties between what's happening in a clinical setting or in a typical setting for a pharmacist versus what's happening inside of the product management kind of space, which I love. I do think the research piece, we touch on it, but we don't go deep enough sometimes, because everybody will say, well, I'm a this, that, or the other, and I can look at stuff, like I can look things up. And I think that's really fair, that everybody has Google, like everybody can type in what is the word. And it really brings me back to some conversations Zain and I have had in the past when it comes to prompt engineering, right? When we're talking about how are we going to leverage artificial intelligence and make it give us answers we actually need. And I think that's the big difference, is that when we're talking pharmacists in particular, like very well trained on prompting, like getting the answers in a way that's necessary to answer the actual question, like to get to the true root of the question, not the surface level question, but what we really need the answer to be. And so I think that training of going through journal clubs, of having to look into mechanisms of action, having to go through all the elements of care, everything from pharmacogenomics and deep personalized medicine components all the way down to cultural beliefs and kind of ethnic components to medicine and traditional care. And so we have that broad base of knowledge to be able to pull in all the issues that we can think of into the kind of one streamlined level of thought. The one thing I did want to highlight for you guys to make sure that we talk about is, where have we dropped the ball on opportunities? Because for me, like, I'm looking squarely at like pharmacogenomics. Guess what? Genetic counselors are getting plugged in instead of us. Cannabis and the utilization of marijuana. We have now cannabis shops that are used instead of pharmacists that are inside of those spaces. And I think that list continues to go on a little bit further. So anything's there that you feel like we need to learn from some of those past lessons if we're going to own some of these new spots in health tech?
I think that it kind of goes back to my initial point. We need to stop waiting for doors to open for the pharmacy profession, and we need to start creating our own roles. A lot of these things, if you look at the nursing profession, and they didn't ask, right? NPs, APPs, all these professions are popping up because nursing is forcing the issue. They're like, hey, no, we're going to start prescribing. We're going to start doing this. We're going to start doing this. They weren't waiting around like pharmacy is like, oh, hey, can somebody please help us out here? No, I mean, they just went out and did it. And I think that's what pharmacy needs to do is as a profession. But the problem is, and I might get some hate for this, but we have way too many groups. We have way too many different stakeholders. We don't have one unified front, even like two unified, forget that, even three unified fronts. We are so fragmented and all over the place, and it brings us down. Like, we need either one or two like huge groups that we can really like lobby and push through, because that's what nursing has. That's what all these other professions have. People, they all have these things. But we sit here, most people don't even know we have a doctorate degree. Like, I mean, we joke about it. I'm sure all of us, when we graduated, they say this is the first and last time you're ever going to be called doctor. And not that we're asking people to call us doctor, but people are surprised that pharmacists, we are doctors, and we literally have a doctorate degree. So again, it's just a matter of putting ourselves out there and also just not waiting for the opportunity to open up. We just need to create it.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think Zain hit on a lot of good spots, right? The unification of one single voice, I think that definitely needs to happen, right? We are fragmented into many different groups, right? From the pharmacy association point. I think another point is, what are we doing to educate people in pharmacy school about the different avenues, right? And that responsibility comes on people like us, right? This is the first year that I graduated pharmacy school in 2016. That was 7 years ago. This is the first year that I signed up to be a pharmacy mentor, right? And so that's 5-6 years where I could have done it, and I chose not to do it. And how are we supposed to then have influence over the generation below us for pharmacy school graduates if we're not plugging ourselves in, especially as those that have roles that are not in traditional pharmacy, right? And so just educating them from that standpoint, and then being open-minded, allowing people to actually come to us, right? Talk to us, and answering them back, and helping them out, making those connections. Because it's not always easy being a pharmacist trying to get into the business world side of things, right? Zane, you mentioned 3 years of lobbying to be a product manager. And we know what our profession brings. We know what we were taught in school. The tangible, the intangibles. I think that's where it starts. It starts with people like us giving a bigger platform and really bringing the innovation to others, right? Showing them what we can do, showing them what our products can do and how we can influence our products and our end users, and then bringing that to the younger generation.
Yeah. And this, I went through a stage in my career where I hated pharmacy. Like, I was like, this is dumb. Like, I see all the things we can do and none of it's being done. But then when I kind of was breaking out or wanted to switch, I still kept the PharmD after my name. Exactly why Chris said it is, like, if I can make it out, I shouldn't say make it out. If I can change my career or find something that is not traditional, off the beaten path, then I want other people to recognize, like, hey, I'm a pharmacist, and be able to, because I've had awesome conversations with people that are pharmacists or are trying to transition. I've my whole career I was a preceptor, so every time I talk to students, I didn't just tell them, like, hey, just go to residency or just do this or do that. I talked to them what they liked and were interested in, and was like, help them try to find maybe their role in pharmacy, right? And I completely agree with you. It starts with, like, the younger generation. I am pretty old now, actually, so I could say that without sounding too pretentious. But yeah, I mean, they're the ones that are going to take it. But I mean, to Chris's point, we need to, like I said, that's really the only reason I keep the PharmD after my name, is because I want to, not saying that, I mean, at least my little part of the world, I want to show other pharmacists that, hey, if a dumb person like me can do it, they can 100% do it. Like, I'm average. Like, there's nothing crazy about me. So there's a lot of amazing talent out there. There's a lot of people that can do so much, and they just feel trapped. And I think that it's really important for us to give back.
Yeah, you mentioned the job satisfaction of pharmacists, right? And you touched on it where, you may not have liked being a pharmacist. And, I see that so often in our profession. And, one of the biggest things that, I spoke to somebody who was the chief pharmacy officer of a technology company. And he has said, it's time to use your voice, right? It's time for all of us to use our voices to really advance this cause and get us to where we need to be. And I think that's something that really stuck out with me was, we can kind of talk the talk, but there comes a time where we have to pioneer ourselves, right? You said it yourselves. Nurses just do it. They go out in there and take it. And that's that kind of mentality that we need to have, right, as a profession.
Yeah, I love it. It's interestingly, it segues really well for me. Our next and most recent show that comes up for RPH Ally is myself and Jaron Stout on rebranding the profession. So finding ways to rebrand what we're doing inside of pharmacy. And he is a traditional pharmacist in ways, in a very untraditional way about it. Like, he's working in long-term care and doing consulting, but he's pushing the envelope on how we can do it, pushing the envelope on how it gets billed, and actually using his voice to make sure that we're getting to the right stakeholders. I think him and Jenna Quinn and Thea are all individuals that I really enjoy, that we don't always have to go outside of pharmacy. Like, sometimes we have to stand up and stamp our foot down and say, here are the things we have to offer, and showcase them in the way that they can be reimbursed. appropriately, and then get the number of people behind them so it happens. Because the tech jobs that are out there, or the pharmacy management jobs versus product management jobs, we're not creating more of those at scale. Like, so that is always my biggest beef toward, like, I want to get out of the profession. It's like, well, great, but right now, when it comes to scaling our profession in terms of number of bodies and FTEs, guess where the majority of our colleagues sit? It is not in health tech. It's not in hospital. It's in retail, right? And so I think that's the one thing that we have to do, is we have to be able to reinvent on several levels if we hope the profession can continue to expand the overall reach and breadth of our knowledge base and get those into our communities to be successful. And at the same time, I think the diversifying of our skill sets and spreading out into the technology world, into law, into et cetera, that I'm sure we'll talk about soon, is just as important. Reason why? Because then all these other individuals that would never encounter a pharmacist now see one and go, wow, those skill sets are really transferable. You guys, thoughts on that to close?
Yeah, 100%. I think, kind of going back to the initial story I said about the doctor that worked with pharmacists, people, and I'm sure both of us have talked about it. Everyone that works with a pharmacist says, "Oh my God, you guys save our lives. We couldn't work without you." All that, but like, people that don't work with pharmacists don't see that, right? They only see us. Oh, you guys do more than just put pills in a bottle. Like, we've all heard that, right? Oh, just you're just sliding pills in a bottle, and you tell them, like, hey, it's a little bit more than that. We're doing all this stuff. Like, I'm the one answering while the Walgreens pharmacist is taking longer than the 5 seconds it takes that they think it takes, right? So, that's just like, the rebranding part, right? I love that somebody's thinking about that, is the rebranding part. And I think that, all of us, we all can't take the burden of everything, but like me, like, I'm focused on tech. Like, hey, let's try to bring other people in tech. Other people are focused on, hey, let's make a better area for retail. Like, we all have our own avenues. And I think that's one thing that needs to be stamped in pharmacy school. There's more than just 3 doors. There's hundreds of doors. And it's just a matter of empowering. It's about empowering people to say, like, yes, you might have a crazy idea. It might not be done, but let's figure out a way to get it done. And I don't think that exists it exists at a personal level. Obviously, like, we are examples of that, but it doesn't exist at a professional level, right? And I think that that's what is needed, is like, we need people to show, like, we need that support system to help people, like, hey, okay, we might not have somebody, but let's see if we can find a way to get pharmacy into this area.
Love it. Chris, final thoughts, buddy?
Yeah, 100%. I think you guys hit it right on the head, right? Rebranding of pharmacy. I love that so much, right? Rebranding in terms of, what does the public think that pharmacists do, right? It's not just dispensing. It's not just, slapping a label on a bottle, right? There's so much that goes into what pharmacists actually really do. We need to be able to innovate. We need to, step up and pioneer our own co-partners, our own co-pharmacists, right? To make it a better place, and better working profession for everyone. And one last thing I'll do, it's a little bit of a hot take, right? And I do feel like, there's a lot of this, kind of stigma, right? Of when you're in pharmacy school, you go to rotations, or you're in residency, some things can, some mentors, teachers, whatever you want to call them, they can be pretty rough, right? They can tear you down more than build you up. And that's a problem, right? Because as pharmacists, yeah, we need to know the essentials of drugs. But at the same time, we need to be able to build up everyone. We need to be able to build up our mentees, right? Because they're the ones that's going to take the next step. And that's something that we can all do a better job of.
No, I can't.
I can talk about that for hours and days, but I won't. Maybe that could be another topic.
I knew it was going to be a hot take now.
Hot and frustrating to take. No, I think that is a really good subject for us to jump on here really soon, is just to talk about how to truly mentor the next generation, if it's going into pharmacy or into health tech / pharmacy, which is a really good segue into. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for all the participation. Jonathan, thank you so much for all the kind words you sent our way in the chat there. Anybody have any questions, you shoot them our way, and we'll see you guys next week. For rebranding pharmacy, I'm actually meeting with Jaron, and I are starting that in about 15 minutes. So I'll see you guys there after that. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Bye, guys.